And our first keynote of the day will be delivered by Martin Ruubel. Martin is the president of Guardtime Estonia. He's an entrepreneur with business experience with many technology-based startups. And this year, Guardtime became our diamond sponsor. Thank you for supporting us. And Martin will speak about Guardtime's core business, which is blockchain, and its many applications. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Henry, and it's really great to be here. So I have to note that the side of being a diamond sponsor here, so I'm much more happy of the cooperation that we have ongoing with CCD COE in terms of technical cooperation on the cyber range, the exercises, and so forth. So this is really great honor for us to be partnering with you guys, and I'm very grateful for that. But yes, good morning. It's incredible to see so many of you here this early in the morning, and I'm trying to really justify your trust that allowed you to come here. As mentioned, we'll start today with perhaps a bit contentious and definitely widely understood topic, which is the blockchain technology and its potential in government and defense domains. Being contentious is, of course, never a technology's fault, but it must be admitted that the topic does really get its fair share of hype. So my company, Guardtime, is today the largest blockchain technology company in the world. And two of our biggest client segments are actually governments and defense. So, in fact, all the articles that were rolling there originally based on some rather innocent announcements that either us or one of the customers had made, they are really our announcements. The reason why I showed them is just to sort of get you acquainted what level of kind of hype blockchain nowadays enjoys. So this last beauty, it was actually published the same day I was scheduled to meet with then US Assistant Secretary of Defense, Mr. Steve Welby, who's a very, very smart guy and a very no-nonsense kind of a guy. And by the time we sat down, he had received over 400 requests for comments, mostly from the press, but also from elsewhere in the US government. So the questions were, does Mr. Welby really think that it's indeed smart for the US military to put its secrets on a blockchain? And does Mr. Welby know that Bitcoin is actually run on Chinese servers mostly? So it's safe to say that this meeting didn't go as planned. It wasn't the best meeting. So yeah, I mean, running your military on a blockchain probably does make for a excellent clickbait, but it's also rather misleading and honestly getting a bit distracting already. So, and of course, it's also completely and utterly missing the point of the blockchain as a technology, by and large. But before we get to the point of the blockchain technology, we should probably take a minute or two to walk through what is blockchain in the first place. So I think it's important to be on the same page here. So here goes. Blockchain is a database that is exceedingly difficult to manipulate by any one party. And it's hard to manipulate because the whole thing, the entire database, is everywhere. It's continuously updated. Everybody has a copy. If you would want to try and do something evil or funny with the data stored on the blockchain, everyone else would take a look at what you're doing, disagree, and your changes would just be rejected. So blockchain is about safety in numbers, really. Or more precisely, safety in eyeballs. The more people witness the blockchain, the more secure the data that is stored in the blockchain. So and that is the entire concept in a nutshell. So there is nothing overly complicated about the blockchain. It's a database that is impossible to manipulate because many parties have to constantly agree on what does the true copy of the database look like. It's very, very simple, really. Now, not getting into the issues with the blockchain size of the scalability, which are real, by the way, simply how does that sound like? Does that sound like an awesome tool for running military applications or storing classified data? I mean, would you want your nuclear targeting data to be everywhere, to quote some of the journalists there? So maybe not. But it doesn't really matter because, as I said in the beginning, this is really missing the point here. The point is not to put your nuclear launch-related data on the blockchain. The point is to use the immutable property of the data in the blockchain to verify that the code that manages the launch sequence is not compromised, to make sure that the targeting data is not compromised. You want the launch to go exactly as the way it's planned. And if the code is compromised, either because of the technical malfunction or because of malicious tampering, it doesn't matter really. You will absolutely not get what you planned for. So you'd get a disaster, really. Of course, the nuclear is completely over the top example, but since most of the hype articles talk about nuclear, then why not talk about it here as well? But the point is you want to be sure that the information you process and the software that processes the information are not compromised. So in other words, you want the data you collect, store, and process to have integrity, because that's what integrity is. It's the absence of compromise. Because the question now is that how do you enforce the data integrity using the blockchain technology while not putting the classified data out there for everyone to see and agree upon, right? So, and it's rather easy really again, and involves some cryptographic trickery called data hashing. So let's talk through that as well. So data hashing is a concept that is very similar to fingerprinting a person. You take a fingerprint because that uniquely identifies the person, and you will always get the same fingerprint from the same person. But you cannot recreate the person from that fingerprint, right? So it's exactly the same with the data hashing. You take any piece of data, it doesn't matter if it's a video file, software component, or a log entry. You run a hash function on it, and you will receive a data fingerprint. The fingerprint is called hash value, and the hash value uniquely identifies the piece of data, but it doesn't allow you to recreate the original data based on the hash value. Now, if you accept that the blockchain is an immutable database because it has a lot of eyeballs on it, and that the hash value uniquely represents the data but doesn't tell you anything about the data itself, then putting the hash values onto the blockchain in order to verify that the original data hasn't been corrupted isn't really that hard to imagine at all, even for military applications. So how would it look like? So you'd first run a hash function on your nuclear launch code, all inside of the secure networks, of course. And then you send the resulting hash value, the data fingerprint, into the blockchain for everyone to see. And then you compare the hash value on the blockchain with the data inside of the secure network. So if the two have a match, you're good to go. And if there isn't a match, you're in trouble, obviously, and you need to figure out what to do next. But at least you know. This is important. Knowing you're in trouble always tends to be the first step of fixing anything. That also sounds kind of trivial, but let me ask you a question. One of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world, FireEye, publishes an annual report on the state of the affairs in cyber. And one of the parameters they are looking at is what is the average time between the system breach and the discovery of that breach among the customers. Anybody wants to guess what is the number? 140 days, 200. Actually, very good guesses. It's 205 days today. So that's 7 months, ladies and gentlemen. 7 months somebody is in your system doing something without you having a clue. So, and this is the state of the cybersecurity currently amongst the customers of one of the largest cybersecurity companies out there. Knowing that you're in trouble is important and absolutely not trivial. So if you need more convincing, think about Mr. Snowden and NSA. That took a year and a half. And to be honest, nobody actually managed to catch him before he went public. Having blockchain-backed integrity instrumentation in a system is completely changing the game here, because no one, no insider, no government, not even a blockchain vendor itself, is able to manipulate the results of the blockchain-based integrity verification. And remember, you can do the blockchain-based instrumentation to any data that is inside of your system, including the data that is actually responsible for processing the information, the log files, the access lists, everything. We have learned that governments really care about these kinds of properties. So most prominently, of course, the Estonian government. Let's talk about that a little. Estonian government started testing a flavor of blockchain technology as early as in the spring 2008. And this is significant because this was 6 months before the Bitcoin white paper ever appeared. So Estonian government started experimenting with the blockchain technology because before the term blockchain was ever created, right? That's pretty early. Their original use case was making sure no insider in government systems could tamper with the data stored in the registries, and that wouldn't go unnoticed. So the driver for that was really the 2007 cyber attacks, when the question was asked that, okay, we are able to sort of bear the external threats, but what if somebody from the inside tampers with the data, changes the blood type, whatever? And the question actually was, would we know? And the answer was no, we wouldn't. So that was the reason why we started actually commercializing our research done in Tallinn Technical University as well as Tartu University about blockchain. Back in the day, we didn't call it the blockchain, by the way, because the term didn't exist. We called it hash linking timestamping, which was absolutely not sexy, and nobody really understood that. But hey. Today, all important registers in the much lauded Estonian e-government system are backed by the blockchain. So healthcare registry, business registry, land registry, pretty much everything. Production use started in 2012. The first registry to be sort of integrity instrumented by the blockchain was succession registry, which deals with people's wills, other inheritance-related data. So pretty important to be sure that the integrity is intact. But by any rate, the ability to trust the government data 100% under any circumstances does sound like a foundational capability for any nation state in the 21st century. And today, at least, Estonia looks again like a perfect lab setting for investigating the best practices on how it can be done. But of course, the use of blockchain in Estonia doesn't really stop here. When PKI-based electronic ID and X-Road were the absolute core technologies that built the e-Estonia success story in the last decade, the blockchain is the core technology stack that matters in the next decade. So we're talking about quantum immune blockchain-based digital IDs, we are talking about data embassies, personalized medicine. It's really super, super exciting. And the lessons that Estonia has learned over the past 10 years are really quite invaluable also inventing this future. Because at the core of everything, you really need to have the integrity instrumentation, sort of a attestation layer for all the data that you store. Now, perhaps even more importantly than governments, for us at least, the military has taken notice of the blockchain also. Our earlier nuclear example is actually not entirely the journalist's fault or my fault. It's what the DARPA program manager brought forward to illustrate the potential significance of the blockchain for the defense sector. I'm pretty sure he regretted it, that he brought this example, but he did. And why military adoption is important is quite obvious. I mean, most of the really influential big technologies that we take for granted today, like computers, internet, they have gotten its wing from the military applications. So history teaches us that military is crucial for technology adoption. It's crucial for honing the technologies so they actually would be secure and usable. And it really does look right now that blockchain is starting to check that box also. We mentioned DARPA, so maybe let's talk a bit more about them. The most exciting thing that DARPA is doing in the blockchain space right now is they view blockchain as a fundamental integrity component to realize what they call a moonshot, so creating a formal structure for unhackable code. Unhackable code needs to be in quotation marks always because, but the idea is that you have a code that will have an absolute independent integrity anchor, and if somebody tries to hack it, modify it, then it will be in real time discovered and mitigated. And I think this is truly, truly exciting, and not only in the defense space, critical infrastructure would benefit tremendously, and actually every one of us as well. I would love nobody being able to hack my operating system. DARPA in general thinks, and I quote them, whenever weapons are employed, it tends to be a place where data integrity in general is incredibly important, and I really couldn't agree more. Lockheed Martin just became the first major defense prime to incorporate blockchain technology into their offerings in a number of programs of record. So important is that not in the innovation lab stuff, but actual programs. And that may sound like a brave thing to do, being the first, but it's really not that risky what they are doing. So when you consider they chose the same technology that has been tested since 2008 by Estonian government. And of course, they did their own POCs and tests over 2 years and built, amongst other things, mission assurance systems and so forth. But today, Lockheed seems to think that blockchain is ready for prime time and can provide their customers with a true edge. So, as a summary, I would like to leave leave you with 3 points. So firstly, no one, apart from an old sensational journalist, expects military to take their existing systems and port them to run on a public blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum, for example. So no one is saying that. It's not what it's about for mission-critical applications, especially in government and military. What it is about is integrity of your networks, systems, and information. So integrity means being free of corruption. And for the first time in history, this is technologically possible without having to trust any sort of authority. I mean, authorities can be compromised, but blockchain and information on the blockchain, it can be mathematically proven to be secure. And this is the big deal about the blockchain. It's about immutable integrity, something that has never been possible before. And lastly, blockchain technology today is something that really no more needs to be locked down into the innovation lab in the basement of the least attractive building in your campus. It really doesn't need to be there. So integrity instrumentation is desperately needed. And when carefully chosen and implemented using the best practices, blockchain technology adds tremendous value to existing production systems already there. Leaving the private sector aside, Estonian government alone has close to 10 years worth of experience in testing the blockchain technologies for independent integrity verification of its systems and stored data. And they have 5 years of experience in using it for production environment in places like healthcare and land records and other critical data sets. US military is building solutions where private blockchain is the foundation of the entire security paradigm. They're really building it right now. Companies like SAP have identified blockchain as a key technology to complement their defense logistics supply solution. We just made an announcement at Sapphire where we actually demonstrated the solution. Cisco is piloting their networking supply chain solution. Lockheed is doing their own thing. So with formal security proofs and production track record, blockchain is not something for tomorrow. Blockchain is for today. It really is here and now. And this is really my main message here. So if you want to get a bit deeper look into the science behind the blockchain and the relevant solutions, so I think you should check out the panel in the room 2. It's 3:30, I believe. I know there's some really, really good research and really, really good stuff there. So I highly recommend you to actually check it out if you're interested in a blockchain. But meanwhile, thank you, and please enjoy your stay here at CyCon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have time for a few questions, but you have to raise your hands really high because I'm blinded by the lights.
There is a hand.
Yeah, there is a hand.
Good morning, sir. Lieutenant Commander Joe Hatfield from the United States Naval Academy. You mentioned that the military would not want to put their actual nuclear launch codes or any sort of highly classified data, publicly available without some sort of viewing it through a hash function or whatever. Would there be any, so when we think about blockchain, something like Ethereum, which has a Turing-complete programmable language that rides on top of the Ethereum blockchain, would there be any advantage to militaries using that programming language? Or is that just another option amongst programming languages?
Well, firstly, I think when you talk about smart contracts, then what we are getting with Turing-complete languages was a little bit demonstrated last summer when the DAO breach actually happened. So we are at position that what comes to smart contracts, then they definitely shouldn't be Turing complete, because that enables you to introduce loops into the system, and essentially it is impossible to formally verify Turing complete smart contract. For your first kind of a point, actually, I think that the data should not be on a blockchain not only for the military, for also for majority of the applications. And the reason being that as soon as you put the data into the blockchain, the entire construct doesn't scale. It just doesn't scale because it needs to process too much information. So for example, we have solved this problem by dividing the blockchain stack into 3 discrete layers. So we have this attestation layer or integrity instrumentation layer as a completely separate layer, which only stores the hash values, which are the representatives of the data. And then the ledger layer or a storage layer is separate of that, meaning that you can actually choose how do you want to deploy this. Do you want to deploy this in-house? Do you want to have it publicly out there? Do you want to have some kind of a hybrid model? Or maybe you want to use your existing legacy system, so maybe you don't want to use the ledger at all with the distributed consensus. And what we have learned is that this is pretty much right now the only architecture that actually scales. So no, I wouldn't put the actual data on a blockchain for these kinds of applications, at least.
Thank you again, Martin, for this interesting talk and for proving that there is indeed substance behind the hype.
Thank you.